Shalom, Havarim. Hello, friends. It's good to see you on this third Sunday of Easter. You have probably heard me tell some pretty bad jokes over the years, even if you've never set foot in St. Mennonite Church. But today I have to admit that this was probably the best yet. It's probably the best dad joke that I've heard in a while, and it engages a certain part of your brain that you've maybe not engaged in a while. It's the part that thinks about geography. Because today's joke comes to us from the country known as the United Arab Emirates and the cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So it's a really important question for you all to consider. Do you know the difference between the people who live in Dubai and the people who live in Abu Dhabi? The people who live in Dubai don't like the Flintstones, but the people in Abu Dhabi do. Abu Dhabi do. All right, I can hear you laughing even through the internet. All right, that's awesome. Of course, our sermon for today has nothing to do with Abu Dhabi or Dubai, but we are going on a journey. Today's text, as it is 2 out of 3, I think, years on the lectionary cycle, the third Sunday after Easter, often returns to this story of the road to Emmaus. And you may have heard this one. It's one of my favorite stories. It's a story about these two men, and they're traveling from Jerusalem to the city of Emmaus. And they're walking along and they're having a conversation, and all at once, this guy just shows up. They don't know him, he's a complete stranger. And this guy says, "Hey, what are you guys talking about?" And they're like, "Are you the only one who hasn't heard? Let me tell you about what happened." Now, this is taking place on Easter Sunday, and they're just coming off this whole experience of seeing Jesus killed on the cross and laid in the tomb. There's these rumors that are going around that Jesus has risen, but these guys, they haven't seen it. And as they're walking and talking, they're telling this stranger about all of their emotions and this roller coaster that they've experienced, these highs, about how they thought that Jesus was going to be the one. He was going to be the guy who brought them out of this pressure that they felt from Rome, out of this rulership of the empire. He was going to bring them into freedom. And they talked about how they expected him to be the Messiah. And then this stranger says something to them, and it would have been a really good time for me to look up the Greek word, but I looked at the different translations. This stranger calls these people a bunch of knuckleheads. That's my language. Some translations, he says, "You idiots," or "you fools." And he says, essentially, you have missed the point entirely. The stranger then walks them through the story of the Bible and how God has called this people to be his people. And that how God has moved through this people and through the prophets right up until the very day, and how Jesus was to be killed and then on the third day rise again. Well, these men and the stranger, they arrive in the city of Emmaus, and these men, they convince the stranger to join them for an evening meal. And the stranger enters into the house and he sits down with them and he has a prayer. He breaks the bread, he has the cup, and he gives it to these people. And it's only then that they realize who he is. Now, those of us who have been reading the story, we have some insight that those men didn't have. We know that this guy is the resurrected Jesus. But it's not until they sit down and they have these elements, this bread and the cup, that they truly see who he is. And it's very reminiscent of the Last Supper, where Jesus takes the bread and he breaks it, and he has the cup and he passes it around and says, "Do this in remembrance of me." And as soon as the disciples there, as they gather in that room in Emmaus, as soon as those men realize who he is, he's gone. And I love the verse that describes what they're feeling. The men, they say, Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? Jesus was right there with them, and they didn't even know it. All right, well, it's time for me to come clean. It's not exactly a confession, but I'm just going to put it out there, and now all the internet world will know that I really like Tom Holland. I should get his name right since I really like him. I really like Tom Holland. Tom Holland, if you don't know who he is, he's an actor, and he dances well, and he's funny. He's like 23 years old. He's just seems like a good all around guy. He's the kind of guy that I would want to hang out with, if the coronavirus wasn't among us, and if I knew famous people. But he's the kind of guy that I would want to spend time with. He seems like that kind of guy. Most people know who Tom Holland is because of his work in the movies The Avengers. Tom Holland plays Spider-Man, and he also has several of his own feature films based on that character, Spider-Man. And I've always been drawn to Spider-Man. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because it's this little wimpy kid, this nerdy kid, um, and I can relate to that. And he never seems to get the girl. He never seems to get anything right. But yet here he is, this big superhero. I guess I can relate to part of that story. So Tom Holland, he's this wonderful guy, at least from the appearances that I see on television and social media and internet. But this week he appeared on a late night TV show. And this late night TV show host was in his home in like New York or LA, some US town. Tom Holland's off in his home in Great Britain. Holland is British by birth. So they're talking back and forth across the pond, across the interwebs, and they're having this conversation. And finally, this late night talk show host, his name is Jimmy Kimmel. He shares a story with Tom Holland. He says, "Today's actually my son's third birthday, and I promised him that for his third birthday we would have the real Spider-Man come to his party." No, Jimmy Kimmel admitted he was just going to hire some guy to dress up like Spider-Man and tell his son that was the real Spider-Man. I mean, since well, I don't know. The kid's not going to know anything different. He's 3 years old. And then Kimmel asked Tom Holland, he said, "Hey, would you mind just saying happy birthday to my son?" And Tom Holland said, "Yeah." The camera cuts away and it comes back, and Jimmy Kimmel's there. He's got his kids, one on each knee, his 3-year-old son, and I think his like 5-year-old daughter. And Tom Holland comes back into the screen, and he's got some sort of a mask on with sunglasses and red gloves, and he shoots some spider webs at the camera. He doesn't actually have the real Spider-Man costume because he didn't take that with him. I don't think they let you take that home with you. I don't know. Maybe actors could tell me differently, but he didn't have the costume, the real costume, but he had a mask, he had some gloves, and he took that off and he began speaking. And he didn't speak in his normal British accent. He spoke as if he was actually Spider-Man. And he said to the kids, he called them by name. He says, "Hey, this is me, Peter Parker. And I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday." And they all sang happy birthday to this 3-year-old. Something about that is pretty awesome. You see, who would hold it against a famous actor if he chose not to pretend to be a character from a comic book for a 3-year-old? Because a 3-year-old's not going to remember that. But he did it anyway. And I remember sitting there watching this video and thinking, huh, I feel like I just saw Jesus. Now, don't get me wrong, Tom Holland is not Jesus. He's not even really Spider-Man. He's an actor. But yet I could see Jesus in Tom Holland because he went out of his way to make a 3-year-old's day, to make a 3-year-old's birthday memorable. When you put others before yourself, when you go out of your way to bring joy to someone, whether it's doing good for someone or doing acts of service for another, when you put the well-being or the joy of others before your own, well, that is like Jesus. And the funny thing is, you can find joy in bringing joy to other people. And as I sat there watching this video of Tom Holland, I realized that maybe the reason that I started to feel some emotion about this was because just a few weeks earlier, my daughter celebrated her 8th birthday. And we were all quarantined in our home, couldn't have any kind of interaction with friends, but a couple friends showed up in our front yard and they made signs that said, "Happy birthday." That same day, our neighbors who are professional musicians, they sent a text and said, "Hey, can you open your window in your dining room?" And our houses are strangely close together, but we opened our window, and what do you think these musical people did? They played Happy Birthday for my daughter. And in those moments, I saw Jesus. Just before, actually, as I look out the window now, here I'm at the church. If I look in the alley, I can still see this going on. There was a red Dodge Ram pickup truck that pulled up, and people started talking in the alleyway. And I went to see what was going on. And there's this middle-aged bald man and a woman with fire engine red hair that does not look natural at all. It's an interesting couple. They're delivering groceries to the woman who lives next door, and I'm trying to see what he's doing now. He seems to be working on her screen door. I know that this isn't her family. These are probably people that she knows somehow from the community. So if you've ever wondered what Jesus looks like, it looks like a middle-aged woman with red hair driving a Dodge Ram. Again, this is not that these people actually are Jesus, but I can see Jesus in them. I see Jesus in their actions. And I like to joke around whenever I see somebody doing good, whenever I see somebody serving another person, when I see someone going out of their way to make somebody else's life a little bit better or a little easier, I like to say, your Jesus is showing. On the walk to Emmaus, we recognize that we don't always see Jesus, but that doesn't mean he's not with us. Those two men walked that distance from Jerusalem to Emmaus with this guy without ever realizing who he was. But eventually they figured it out. And I want to encourage you as well to look around yourselves. In the midst of all of this pain, all the things that are discouraging, all the things that cause us trouble and suffering, I want you to look for Jesus as well. And I'm not going to ever say that there is nothing going wrong in this world or that there's not reason to be discouraged. But in the midst of all this pain and all the suffering and all the death and all the conspiracy theories, do you see Jesus? Do you see Jesus? Because he's there. He's working through people like you and me, like this woman right over here with the fire engine red hair, like Tom Holland Skyping into some 3-year-old birthday party, like friends standing in the front yard or playing musical instruments on my daughter's birthday. Jesus is among us. He's working through us to make this world a better place. All right, friends, I wish you the best week possible. Now go out and let other people see Jesus working through you.